from the time of blood dripping into Guy Pearce's mouth to this point, what part of this, other than the quote at the beginning, is telling you that this is a fucking comedy?
Oh, so many scenes. All those scenes with... hold on one second.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Shat The Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, then this is the podcast for you. I am one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me is my co-host, Ash Eat to Live Colghoun.
Hi, y'all.
Big D is on vacation in sunny California, but we will persevere. Each week, we take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. The movies we cover are chosen by you, the listeners, who generously commission the films you love. If you'd like to see all the movies we have covered, will cover, or want to choose one for yourself, please visit shatthemovies.com and have a look. At the end of each podcast, we'll provide you, the audience, with the number of wipes each movie takes to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. That's how we help the podcast grow. Additionally, subscribe to our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Lovecraft Country, Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, and Watchmen. Find all that information and past episodes at shatontv.com. And finally, to hang out with us live, follow and subscribe to our Twitch channel, shatthemovies.com/Twitch, where we play video games, host watch parties, and you can watch me edit podcasts like this. So this week, we're changing gears a little bit from In the Army Now, a war comedy, into a horror comedy with a question mark. This is going to be 1999's horror Western cannibal film, Ravenous.
Well, and one of our commissioners, Ben from Japan, wrote in not once, Gene, but twice about this movie that he has so lovingly commissioned. And once is before his rewatch, and then the second is after. So pre-rewatch, Ben had to say, "Hello, Shat Crew. My memory of when I saw this is misty. I most likely saw it in the theater. At that time, movies were cheap, and I saw many every week. The movie itself has stuck with me, though. Despite its troubled production, don't mind the snow, it has the right mix of darkness and silliness. The music oddly fits, and the characters aren't afraid to talk to each other. To this day, I cannot see very rare meat without getting sickening flashes of this movie. Ben." And then he wrote in again and said, "Hello, Shat Crew. I realized in my first email I didn't do any of the normal blah, 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 blah that starts most of the letters. I've been a big fan for a long time. I think maybe from Gene's first episode. I suffered through Roger's eras. Anyone else remember the King Bee's 3-episode run during the hiatus? At least I think it was 3 episodes. Well, let's just say I admire all of you and I like your work. Thanks for taking the commission. It will be entertaining to hear what you say, even if you harbor the wrong opinions. I rewatched Ravenous recently. Actually, I think I've rewatched it 3 times since my last email. I still love it. I hope it isn't a chore for you to get through. Thanks again, Ben in Japan."
Ben, I appreciate you noting the amount of work it takes to do this podcast, especially right now, like during the holidays, while we were trying to do our travel schedules, spend time with family, and still get 7 episodes out in the month of December. We are doing our best to keep up with it. And part of the reason that the Ash, Gene, and Big D crew works out so well is the work ethic of my co-hosts, is that everybody shows up, everybody comes prepared, and you have to sacrifice other things in life to make it happen. So hearing that you appreciate it really means a lot to us.
Yes.
Ravenous is a 1999 horror Western cannibal film starring Guy Pearce, Robert Carlyle, Jeffrey Jones, and David Arquette. The film revolves around cannibalism in 1840s California, and some elements bear similarities to the story of the Donner Party and that of Alfred Packer. The film's production did not get off to a good start, with the original director, Milko Mankiewicz, leaving the production 3 weeks after shooting started. He was replaced by Antonia Bird at the suggestion of Robert Carlyle. Ash, we always ask what your memories are of the movie we're covering. Tonight it's Ravenous. What are your memories of this movie?
So I just want to start out by saying that one of my favorite genres of films is a zombie movie. And I know this is not a zombie movie, but it's a cannibal movie. And so that feels like kind of like zombie light, right? Like it's like living zombies, because zombies are dead. And I also love a Western. So Western cannibal film, yes. Like, it sounds like the most glorious film combination that has ever been created. And I know that I saw this at some point in my life, because when Ben commissioned this a year ago and Big D was like, hey, we've got this commission for Ravenous. Y'all want to do it? And I was like, yes, because I remembered liking it. But I can't really remember when or where. The most recent cannibal film for me is Raw, the French film Raw, which I think is absolutely brilliant. Not a dark comedy at all, just like a straight cannibal film. But it's not a Western. So I thought this one would be cooler, and I was pretty stoked to watch it.
Ash, listener Christopher DeMello on Facebook recently wrote to us after our Titanic episode, and he said, and I quote, "So refreshing to take a break from niche films few people have heard of and get back to what this podcast does best, revisiting movies we've all seen and how they hold up. Even Ash has seen this one. Thank you." Christopher, I don't think In the Army Now or Father of the Bride is exactly like an underground art house movie. I would say that like 99% of the movies that we do are major theatrical releases that pretty much everybody's seen.
You know, Christopher, I have a real problem with this when I read your little thing on Facebook, because what have I not seen other than Stand By Me? And there was another one that was stupid that I hadn't seen. And then all of us hadn't seen Monster Squad.
Yeah, I'm the dude you should be like pointing your finger at. In the Shat Discord, everyone was talking about the new Spider-Man movie, the No Way Home. And I had to just step up and say, guys, I haven't seen a Spider-Man movie since Tobey Maguire was Spider-Man. I mean, I saw Spider-Man like in the Avengers movies, but like I haven't seen a dedicated Spider-Man title, animated or live action, since Tobey Maguire. And I'm lost. It's like there's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and then is this a 3? Is this a 1? I don't fucking know what the fuck
it's an amalgam because of the multiverse. So they're all in this one. All those worlds existed. And it's actually really fantastic. But I also want to point out that you're the culprit too, who always like mixes up the movies.
Yeah.
So you may have thought you saw them, but did you really? So you know what, Christopher? Let's lay off here.
I thought Ravenous was Ghosts of Mars. So.
Well, on that note,
let's hit the trailer.
I'm sending you to California, Fort Spencer.
We have 4 missing soldiers, Captain, and no bodies. We need a supportable explanation.
Captain John Boyd is about to discover
no one just ends up at Fort Spencer. We come for a reason.
Yours being?
Well,
something he never imagined.
We have a great sense of camaraderie here at Fort Spencer.
This Indian scout told me a curious story. Winged eagle.
It's an old Indian myth from the north.
Man eats the flesh of another. He absorbs the other man's strength.
Now, one man must choose.
We need others.
Between having dinner and being dinner. That's so annoying.
Stew a la Major Knox.
Guy Pearce.
I'm gonna kill him.
Robert Carlyle.
He was tough, but then a good soldier ought to be.
Jeffrey Jones.
That was really sneaky.
He was licking me!
Ravenous.
Bon appetit.
During the Mexican-American War, 2nd Lieutenant John Boyd plays dead as his unit is massacred. In a moment of bravery, Boyd seizes the chance to capture the Mexican command post. He is promoted, but exiled to Fort Spencer, a remote military outpost high in the Sierra Nevada, commanded by the weary but genial Colonel Hart, and staffed by a motley array of misfits: the pious Private Toffler, the drug-addicted Private Cleaves, the drunken Major Knox, and the ferocious Private Reich, in addition to the Native American scout George and his sister, Martha.
Okay, so like I said, don't remember anything about this movie. And then it opens up. We've got a Nietzsche quote, and then there's another quote, and it just says, "Eat me, anonymous." And I go, huh. Like, I know that this predates Kill Bill, but it obviously is like very reminiscent of the Klingon gag, you know, at the start, the revenge is a dish best served cold. And I'm like, okay, but hold on, this is a horror cannibal film, right? Like, I remember the box. I remember how serious it is. Randomly, David Arquette is on it, even though he's in this movie for like 3 minutes and wasn't even super famous. But this is not Tarantino, right? This is not some art house funny film. And I go, huh? And from the beginning, I'm like, it's gonna be a little bit of a strange ride.
But Ash, this quote is for people who might question, is this a comedy? I almost imagine they did the movie, they screened it for people. People were like, was this a comedy? Like, all right, we got to do something funny right at the beginning. and it's a great transition too, because you get this quote, you get the Nietzsche, which is misspelled, and then you get the eat me. And then it goes to like the American flag waving and it's like Fox Pictures Presents or whatever. And so I know from the get-go that this movie is not to be taken seriously. And I appreciated them setting the tone immediately.
See, but I'm going to be arguing throughout the entirety of this podcast that the problem is if you had to put a quote at the beginning with a gag, which is one of the only actual laughs in this movie to make people realize what the movie is, you might have some tonality issues in your movie.
Right. But if they didn't do that, you open up with a scene where you got a bunch of military officers that are sitting around after a flashback of the Mexican-American War. They're all eating meat and a guy throws up. And you're going, what the fuck is going on here? Instead, you're like, oh, watch this entire first scene, this gross out scene, and you should be laughing.
Yeah, strangely enough, I was still going, what the fuck is going on here? I legitimately have misophonia. And if you're not familiar with what misophonia is, it is where you become irately angry at certain sounds. And I cannot stand to hear people chew. Like, I hang up on people when they're eating. I'm like, are you fucking eating while you're talking to me? Click. Like, I cannot handle it. And so when you've got this movie and it opens up and you've got Guy Pearce, looking all blank face, very LA Confidential blank Guy Pearce. And he's sitting there and he's sliding his knife and his fork and everybody's chewing and you can hear it. I was cringing. I was getting the bad kind of goosies, not the good ones where you're just like, ugh. And I had to fast forward, and I'm cool with gore. I am fine with the rest of the gore that happens in this movie, all the blood. I don't mind it. But I just don't want to hear people chewing.
If I'm at a table and I'm not eating, I can't be around people who are eating. I'm with you on that. Like, I have to get up and go do something else, because even loved ones, like people I fucking love, this does not apply to dogs, but human beings. If I can hear them eating, I have to just like, I'll go do laundry. I'll go like check the mail. I'll, go do anything clean just to avoid that. But Ash, this is the point of the scene. The movie is supposed to make you uncomfortable. Like, what you're doing is essentially going to a haunted house and complaining that someone jumped out and spooked you. Or like you're going to like a strip club and complaining that the women are too naked. We're supposed to feel disgusted with this consumption, especially of meat that we currently take for granted. And I think it's perfectly done, because if I'm there eating a bagel, let's say, because the bagel is the worst culprit by far.
With the cream cheese.
Yeah, you and I were sitting down, we're at a cafe, we're having a bagel with cream cheese. We're enjoying the shit out of it. We're loving each other's company. The coffee is strong. The weather is brisk. If I don't have that bagel in my hand, I'm throwing my coffee in your face, because I'm like, Jesus Christ, stop it. It's that noise, which is pleasant during blowjobs, horrible when it's a bagel.
Well, I want to call bullshit on something you said, though. I don't agree with your haunted house metaphor here, because I think that it would be one thing if I were complaining about like them eating people. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't want to see him bite into somebody, like, for sure. But I don't need to hear them chew the people, right? Like, even in zombie films, you don't have to hear them chew.
Oh, but those are the best zombie films, when you get to hear the fucking sounds. What they're trying to do is put us in Boyd's head, and it works for me in the sound part. Where it doesn't work for me is in these flashbacks. Now, Big D complained about flashbacks during Batman, Mask of the Phantasm, and I think it actually made me kind of sensitive to them, much like you are with the sound of eating. And so I've decided on a new rule for movies. We'll call this Gene's flashback rule. No flashbacks unless you give me a mystery to solve. Okay? We get all these flashbacks in this movie of Boyd in combat during the Mexican-American War, but they're telling us nothing. Like, you could have told me he survived the battle and took over the post. Okay. There were no details in there that helped me solve any sort of mystery. This isn't Westworld. We're not trying to piece together the events of the last couple days, if they are in fact the last couple days. They don't even give us the puzzle of an unreliable narrator like we got with Bernard. Boyd played dead. He got some blood in his mouth. I don't need a flashback to tell me that. You could just have that in like one line of dialogue.
You mean the 2 lines of dialogue that actually happen in this film, where after the flashback, the captain's like, we're sending you away because, and then later on when he says, literally out of Guy Pearce's mouth, I played dead and got blood in my mouth. So it happened for you. It's completely unnecessary.
Boom, done. And speaking of Guy Pearce, I got another rule that I want to throw out there, which is no Guy Pearce with a goatee. Okay, in Red Dawn, I added half a white for Powers Booth without a mustache because the dude needs his mustache. He's like Samson. It's where he gets his power. His power is Booth. It's the mistake, end of argument. I think it's the opposite for Guy Pearce. I like nearly didn't recognize him. If I didn't know that he was in the credits, I wouldn't have known that was Guy Pearce because he loses the accent as well. This beautiful man should have nothing between his skin and my eyes. I just want his face, his cheekbones, and me, right? And I get it. It's the 19th century. They're trying to be like period appropriate. Everyone had facial hair. But like, if you're going to give a guy facial hair, a mustache is okay. A full beard is okay. That thing that was on his face, no.
See, but I think that this is the problem. It isn't the facial hair, it's Guy Pearce. He's got the Keanu complex because Keanu Reeves is a sexy ass man, but the man cannot grow facial hair. He's got these weird patches, like this little patchy growth that makes him like markedly less hot. It's why I won't let Tom grow facial hair because he doesn't grow it consistently. He's got like these big areas on his face that just for some reason don't grow hair. And that's what Guy Pearce has here. He just looks like a homeless person. He looks like a sad guy.
Wait, doesn't he have a beard in like all the John Wick movies that everybody's raving about? Yes, I also haven't seen John Wick, everyone. I'm sorry.
But it's patchy. He's got like these little areas that are super patchy.
Right, but isn't everybody like, he's so sexy, John Wick?
Well, he's sexy because
so
he's killing motherfuckers, right? Like, I don't think he's sexy because of his facial hair. He's avenging his dog, Gene. How have you not seen this movie? It's an action movie with decent action scenes, which you love, and avenging an animal, which you love. And guns, which you also love.
I'm not allowed to watch any movies outside the 80s and 90s.
No, that's true.
It's my job.
Yeah, maybe if somebody pays enough to commission it, you know.
Shortly after Boyd joins the garrison, a frostbitten stranger named Colghoun arrives, telling a hellish tale about how his wagon train, led by Colonel Ives, became lost in the mountain. Racked by starvation, Colghoun and his fellow travelers were reduced to cannibalism. A rescue party is assembled to retrieve any survivors and capture Ives. George warns those who are leaving about the Wendigo myth. Anyone who consumes the flesh of their enemies takes their strength, but becomes a demon cursed by an insatiable hunger for more human flesh.
So I know a lot of people, when they talk about character actors, they talk about Willem Dafoe, who's amazing. They talk about Christopher Walken, who's amazing. But I have to say, Robert Carlyle, he's like right up there with them for me. I think he's absolutely fantastic. From Trainspotting to the amazing role that he plays in 28 Weeks Later. Never a more scary opening to a movie. This guy like elevates everything that he's in, whatever role that he's in. And he is so good when he plays a bad guy. And from the moment he opens his mouth when like he randomly wakes up from his hypothermic hot bath, you know that he's lying, right? Like, you know that there's something off there. It's really obvious. And he's the only thing that's really enjoyable so far in this movie because I like the manipulation. He was like chewing up the scenes. He's had those crazy eyes that he has. And he's looking all around and he was looking like he was nuts. And when you compare him to whatever the fuck David Arquette was doing in this movie and whatever the fuck your rambling preacher was doing, Carlyle is like clearly heads and shoulders above the rest, including Guy Pearce, who I love. But Guy Pearce even was just like a blank, like white sheet of paper in this.
Guy Pearce was like vanilla soft serve, and Robert Carlyle's given us like Rocky Road here. But David Arquette and the rambling preacher, Jeremy Davies of Lost fame, Daniel Faraday, fucking Saving Private Ryan, like these guys were doing exactly what they were supposed to do. They were playing these very basic archetypes in a comedy horror. Arquette is the goofy stoner. Davies is the religious wimp. These are fucking horror movie archetypes. I kind of appreciated everyone adding a supporting note here and there, but really leaving that space for Carlyle to be the star.
I mean, look, I love Jeremy Davies. My favorite Jeremy Davies role is clearly Secretary. He's so good in that movie with the little role that he plays in that. But I don't know. Like, it doesn't feel like a comedy horror film at this point. Like, what laugh have we had when Robert Carlyle gets there from the time of blood dripping into Guy Pearce's mouth to this point, what part of this, other than the quote at the beginning, is telling you that this is a fucking comedy?
From the second they introduced Jeffrey Jones, the principal from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, like, shit's hilarious. There's that scene where they're all sitting down and he just asks everybody, did anyone do anything today? And you just realize, like, how hilariously bad their situation is, that they just sent a bunch of fuck ups to this camp to just be out of everyone's way. I don't know. I was laughing the whole time.
I don't know. I think there's a big difference between like comic relief in a horror movie like Matthew Lillard and Scream, or like actual black comedy like, you know, Evil Dead, which I'm sure we will get into at some point tonight because like, the comparison has to be made. But
I think in every element of Ravenous, it's refusing to take itself seriously. It's super apparent to me. I don't know if we just watched like a different movie or in a different mindset, because when that party sets off to the cave, who's in charge? In charge. It's Colonel Hart. It's fucking Jeffrey Jones. He's like this rotund, completely like detached, aloof guy who's like, well, I got to do these jobs. He just wants to eat his walnuts and sit around and read books. It's a band of misfits. They're sent to an outpost so they'll be out of the way. And I think that motley mood allows the movie plenty of room to be just imprecise and irreverent and fun. There's nothing to be taken seriously here. Like, yes, people are getting chopped up. There's cannibalism. People are going to die. It's all in good fun.
yeah, I don't know. I think this is where we start to get into another issue that I have with this movie, is that the plot is like paper thin, because I kept sitting there going, wait, but you don't actually have to go. If all the people are dead, like, this guy is not going to find his way to you. And if he does, like, you can kill him. Like, don't worry about it. Like, they're not going to eat you. Like, you don't have to go to this cave and investigate.
But there's a damsel in distress and they're bored.
When I get bored, I read a book. Like, I don't go out on some like cannibal scavenger hunt. And I don't know, this is, it just, I think from here on out, and this is the thing that a lot of people, because this movie has a 46% approval or disapproval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. And that's the biggest argument that people make, is like, the plot just makes like no fucking sense. Here they are, they're going to rescue this one person at a cave. But why? You're comfortable, you have walnuts, you have a weird hot bath. I mean, like, you got all the things that you need. You don't have to go.
I think all those people just wanted to watch The Revenant.
Yeah, well, that's a good fucking movie.
It's just a ripoff of Ravenous. Even the titles are almost the same. When the soldiers reach Ives' cave, Boyd and Reich discover the bloody remains of 5 skeletons and realize that Colghoun is Ives. Colghoun mortally wounds George, Toffler, Colonel Hart, and Reich. Boyd escapes the massacre by jumping off a cliff but breaks his leg. He hides in a pit next to the body of Reich, whom he eventually eats to stay alive. When Boyd limps back to the fort, Cleves and Martha do not believe his wild tale, while the hungover Knox cannot recall Colghoun. A temporary commander is assigned to the fort, but to Boyd's horror, it is Colghoun, who is now calling himself Colonel Ives. So during this like massacre scene, you see Robert Carlyle digging madly in the dirt to try to find like something which we soon realize is a weapon. Ash, until this point, I thought it was Hugh Jackman. It's fucking Begbie. And just so everyone out there knows, if you haven't encountered people with knives or don't know how dangerous a person with a knife is, it's no fucking joke. Knives are dangerous at pretty much every angle. They don't need to be reloaded. They can slash very fast. And the average person can close 21 feet in 1.5 seconds. So if you're thinking there's no way this guy with one knife can kill everybody, he actually picked the best possible weapon to hide out there. To this day, one of my worst fears is being attacked by a person with a knife, because any way you slice it, no pun intended, the shit's going to suck.
I mean, I don't know. I still think guns are pretty scary, but I'm still really hung up on the fact that you thought that Robert Carlyle was Hugh Jackman. I wonder sometimes if you have that face blindness disease where like you can't like actually tell people apart dependent on like if they have similar characteristics.
It's like when we were younger, like I would say like just after college, I could name you every person I'd ever slept with. Like I could just be like, yeah, I could fucking write them down on a piece of paper right here. And I could identify them on site. No.
Just because the number got so high?
Probably because they all look alike.
Well, I have to say, the quote wasn't bad enough in the beginning. We get the weird tone change because unlike you, I didn't think anything was funny up to this point, and I actually loved the cave scene. I thought that was really fucking cool. I liked that they had to go in, and then there was like the little hole. Like it kind of became like that movie The Descent for a second. He's like wiggling his way down this little hole with his torch, and then he gets down there, and it was pretty scary. You got all like the skeletons, and they're all slimy and bloody still, and they're hanging on sticks, and I was like, okay, legit. Like we're getting into like some genuine scary shit. And then Robert Carlyle gets his knife, and he kills somebody, and I'm like, all right. Like this is gonna start picking up, and I'm like, I'm into this, Ben. This is an awesome movie. And then the music from the wait line at Splash Mountain kicks in, and I feel like we're in like some weird ass like hoedown with like a little bit of murder thrown in, and I'm going, what the fuck is this movie trying to be?
Ash, those skeletons look ridiculous. The skeletons look like they were from Pirates of the Caribbean. They look like they could have been on Goonies.
No, they were so slimy, and like the head was weirdly white, and you're like, is that brain matter? I don't know, but it was awesome. It was cool.
Just because there's action and gore doesn't mean we can't be laughing. Like Robert Carlyle is literally licking his lips and doing like cartoony villain stuff with his hands. I expected him to kind of like dance his way through the forest. He's chasing people around with a giant knife. This is giving me vibes of like Evil Dead. And I think that dissonance is intentional. Like when that banjo music kicks in, I'm like, fuck, it's yakety sax. I love it.
Here's the thing. I love Evil Dead. I think it's a great fucking movie. But the difference between this and a classic like Evil Dead, which succeeds in a way of like a true horror comedy, is the issue of scene setting and plot development. You have neither yet really in this film. You have a cool cave with a cool skeleton, but that's it. Again, super paper thin plot development where it's like they were like in the writing room, they're like, okay, we need to reveal Robert Carlyle's the bad guy and he's gonna stab someone. And then Jeremy Davies is like, making like these weird noises and like kind of jumping around. I mean, it was so strange. And I'm sorry, I love Robert Carlyle, but he is not Bruce Campbell. Like there is something about Bruce Campbell where he is a comedian. So like you can feel the physical comedy. Robert Carlyle is a serious actor and you can't really like feel the comedy coming from him. This is nowhere near the caliber of an Evil Dead.
I think you just failed to see that it's a clear parable for Western expansion.
Oh my God.
And it doesn't need to say anything else. The movie speaks for itself, man. Listen to the mountains. Listen to the trees. Listen to the cave. Do not listen to the soundtrack. Ash, the score of this movie is terrible. And I had to look into it because I remember reading that Ravenous had some sort of a unique like soundtrack. So I was very looking forward to seeing what that was all about. I thought it was going to be like a Trent Reznor thing or something like that. And then I listened to it and said, what the fuck is going on here? It's a joint project between Damon Albarn, yes, like Damon Albarn from Blur, and British composer Michael Nyman. And note that I didn't say collaboration. I said a joint project because they did not work together. According to Nyman, Damon Albarn did like 60% of the tracks, and then Nyman, the actual composer, did the rest. And if that doesn't sound like enough of a clusterfuck, for the musicians, they used Foster's Social Orchestra, who had either never played music before or never before played the type of instrument that they would play for the recording. And as a result, we get like banjos playing one note for like 2 minutes straight, which is punctured by like some like Wes Anderson style electric organ. Like you've got guys that are literally caught dead in a bear trap, bleeding to death. And it's like, all that was missing for me was like some fucking Gorillaz lyrics, and it would have been done.
I just like how sci-fi your interpretation of that just was. Because you want to talk about dissonance. I mean, it was just discordant sound. And it was like they pulled every like Western-y type of like instrument. They're like, let's all play this together. I mean, I even feel like there was like a mandolin at one point.
Yeah, but then also like you had vibes from like Moonrise Kingdom coming through. I don't know what the fuck was going on in the soundtrack.
Because they had absolutely no idea what to do. But one thing we have not yet covered, which is this whole cannibalism aspect, right? So, sure, I get it. You're a good guy, Boyd. You don't want to be a killer. Fine. But I don't really get why this type of cannibalism is that bad, because they prove in this movie that you can Louis the shit out of this from Interview with the Vampire. You don't have to eat rats. You can eat legitimate people, but they're dead. And guess what, guys? You're at the edge of a fucking war. So there's a lot of dead people around. I feel like it's much easier for you to swallow this idea for most people than like being a vampire, because you get to like live forever. You get to still be cool and cursed, but you still get to see the sun. So it's like a win-win. Every now and again, you eat a little human meat stew. You put some good seasoning in there. You heal. You stay young. You live your life. I mean, this sounds okay to me.
Think of the fucking career opportunities here. You're in the military.
Yeah.
And you can't be killed.
Right.
All you got to do is eat people that you're going to fucking bury. And nobody's going to notice a body or two gone here and there from every battle.
Just take a finger.
Eh.
You know, I mean, it doesn't appear that there's, I mean, not that the lore of this movie is very well thought out, but it doesn't appear that there's like a quota of meat. It's not you have to consume a whole human. You can eat a finger or, you know, a little toe or maybe an ear and you're good.
Not only that, but you're supercharged by the meat of people who are brave.
Right.
So who's braver than people going willingly into combat? I mean, you are fucking set for life.
And you got to eat like the meat of your enemy. So like, I feel like, you know, again, when you're on the battlefield, just pick up a couple of scraps for later. You got some leftovers, you get a paper cut, you take a little bite, you're working fine. Like I could be this kind of cannibal.
Also think about it. It's the 1800s. So like a couple of years, you could be eating Mexican, and then you can eating some Southern food. Like it's working out really well.
Yeah. I feel like they just don't get it. They don't see the opportunity. Short-sighted.
No, that's right. Men. Well, Colghoun tells Boyd that he used to suffer from tuberculosis, but when a native scout told him the Wendigo myth, then he just had to try by murdering him and eating his flesh, a process that cured his disease. Colghoun now plans to use the fort as a base to cannibalize passing travelers. Boyd is soon suspected of murdering Cleves and watches helplessly as Knox is murdered by Calhoun's unexpected ally, Colonel Hart. Colghoun had saved Hart by feeding him his own men. Colghoun mortally wounds Boyd, forcing him to make a choice, eat or die. Ash, I gotta admit, I'm disappointed so far because I was fully expecting you to swoon over this movie. We've got elements of Lost Boys. We got elements of Interview with the Vampire. We got elements of Westworld and an actor who was in Saving Private Ryan. These are all things that you really love. Like, what went wrong here? What's missing that you're not getting?
I think two things: actual scares and actual comedy. I think that the movies that you just mentioned,
the two parts of a horror comedy,
right, of a horror comedy film. I mean, I give them the Western part because it takes place in the West, right? And they have horses, but like, fuck the other two. I mean, here's the thing. All those other movies you mentioned, they have an intelligence to them. This plot, it's crazy. The jokes are one-offs. I don't think they're funny. And there's nothing in this movie that scares me. Never once in this movie was like, oh God. Like, you know, I was like just watching it. I was kind of like Guy Pearce, just like had a blank face the entire time. And I think a movie that's come out more recently than like an Evil Dead is like the one that is a tribute to Evil Dead, which is Cabin in the Woods. That movie rides this line really, really well. It has some genuinely scary moments in it. It's really fun and deeply gory, but it's fucking hilarious. Like that movie ends, spoiler alert, with them sitting there sharing a cigarette after having been like torn apart by a werewolf while like gods come and kill them and Sigourney Weaver. Like it's a great movie. And that's what I expect from a dark black comedy horror film. I expect it to scare me and I expect it to make me laugh and I expect it to gross me out. And even that, like I was expecting this to be like gut churning, like that movie Raw that I mentioned. Like that movie is hard to watch. This though, I mean, I was like, okay, like there's some blood. Like, oh, look at them. They're making a meat stew, but it wasn't gross. And I wanted it to be grosser. This feels haphazard. It feels messy. And worst of all, for a movie about eating people, it feels really fucking bland.
I mean, setting Joss Whedon as a standard for filmmaking is I think it's a little unfair, right? Like, not everyone's going to be at that level.
You threw out Evil Dead. Like, you threw the gauntlet.
When you're looking at these horror movies, they generally fall into like a couple categories, right? It could be something supernatural. It could be something extraterrestrial. It could be something scientific. And those are usually the way, is it a mutation caused by radioactivity or a virus, or is it something from outer space, or is it some sort of ghost or some sort of supernatural myth? In this case, like, we don't really get any of that. There needs to be an event or an origin like we get in Vampire Tales, but Boyd didn't go through all that. He didn't eat a scout. He was in battle and he got some blood in his mouth, which I imagine loads of Mexican-American war veterans did. Like, it doesn't add up. Nothing about these people is particularly special because Boyd can do it. Calhoun can do it. Hart can do it. So what the fuck? Are they basically saying if anybody eats anybody, they suddenly become Superman?
I think that you have to consume the meat, right? I think he doesn't become super cannibal until he eats Reich when he's like in the little area, right? I think but is that his enemy? I don't know. Then I think you get into a definition of who's your enemy, because it isn't like the enemy was like on the other side. It's just somebody who wasn't very nice to him. You're proving my point here. Shitty plot. Very thin.
Fuck. Eventually, Boyd gives in and eats a stew made from Knox. He convinces Hart to free him so he can kill Calhoun, and Hart asks Boyd to kill him because he no longer wants to live as a cannibal. Boyd and Calhoun fight until Boyd forces Calhoun into a large bear trap that pins them both together. General Slauson shows up and tastes the meat stew left simmering on the fire. Martha sees the deceased Calhoun and dying Boyd together, closes the door, and walks away. While we're on the topic of shit that doesn't make any sense, like, what the fuck is Hart's objection here? He seems perfectly happy being a cannibal until he's not. This is literally how it goes for Hart. I feel great. Like, I'm finally not bored out here. All my philosophical dilemmas are cleared up. I'm getting some color in my cheeks. I don't need glasses anymore. Now please stab me to death with a dull dagger. What the fuck?
Yeah, I don't disagree. And I also think it's uneven, the healing thing, because I was expecting Hart to come in like all svelte and sexy because now he's like a cannibal, like an Anne Rice, like vampire transformation. Like, his hair that was thinning is going to grow back in. And, if he's not having to wear glasses, doesn't make sense to me.
But his death does lead us to kind of like the big finale where they just go all out with the gore. Everybody's stabbing everybody. Everybody's getting their arms, chopped off, getting forks in the gut and everything. The climax of this battle, we get this battle between Calhoun and Boyd, and they're just laying into each other. And I think the idea here is that they've both been supercharged by eating meat, so they're not like easy to kill, right? Like, they've got to be really just fucked up. This fight's pretty great. It ends in this bear trap. Boyd sees the bear trap in the shed. What's going to come into play later, but I think everybody's expecting like he's going to set a trap and then Calhoun's going to step in it and ha. No. I had no idea the way they were going to use it. It's so romantic. He grabs him and he tosses him onto the bear trap, impales his head on a spike, and then they're closed in like this lethal embrace together in the bear trap. And we get this one final hilarious laugh where Robert Carlyle looks up and says, "That was sneaky." No, you didn't laugh at that?
I mean, it was sneaky that, we finally got to the point of this film, which is that clearly Calhoun and Boyd are in love with each other. And I get it. There was a running gag about the podcast before I came on that like you guys always thought that people were gay upon rewatch. But I have to admit, even though I thought a lot of the times y'all were full of shit, I don't with this film. Because there's multiple times when they're having like this very seductive fight where they're penetrating each other with knives and instruments. And I'm like, oh my God, like they're going to make out, right? Like they're going to just stop fighting and start making out a la like Buffy and Spike when they have sex for the first time after beating the shit out of each other and making a house collapse. Like,
spoiler
I
alert.
Figured that we're going to run off together and be like a sexy cannibal couple. And then they get trapped in the bear trap. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, like a sexy lover's embrace here. And they're looking in each other's eyes and they're threatening to eat one another. And then they lovingly snuggle and die. And I mean, am I crazy here that this may just be a really strange allegory about homosexuality?
Ash, when you've written as many liberal arts essays as the two of us have collectively, your brain can't help but go there. Like, I was already making the essay in my head. Ravenous absolutely could be seen as an allegory of homosexuality because Calhoun isn't trying to kill Boyd. He's trying to awaken that thing inside Boyd that he sees in him, that he has in himself. At one point, they're standing across from each other, very close, as you mentioned. And he says, "It isn't courage to resist me. It's courage to accept me." And of course, I had to see if anybody else out there, like credible, was thinking along the same lines, or if there was an actual academic paper on it. I couldn't find an academic paper on it, but there is a blogger that goes by Jude and the Obscure. And they point out that there's YouTube footage of Carlyle doing commentary on the movie. And he's watching the scene and shouting, "Just kiss him." He also says, and this is Carlyle, that Colghoun doesn't just want to eat Guy Pearce. He's going to have Guy Pearce at the same time. And then further, note that the only person from the fort who survives is Martha. What sets her apart from everybody else?
She's a woman.
Bingo. I think it's just a slam dunk case.
I don't disagree, but you know what this is a total ripoff of then? A much far superior movie, The Lost Boys.
I was going to say Interview with the Vampire.
Well, in Interview with the Vampire, they at least like are implied to be lovers, right? And The Lost Boys, you've got David. Is he a bad guy? No, he's just, trying to get Michael to awaken to his own sexuality and have him come over to the gay side, and in here the same thing. Instead of the gay side, they call it the cannibal side. But The Lost Boys at least does a little bit better. But I have to say, Robert Carlyle, Guy Pearce, I could be done with that. It's kind of hot.
All right, well, now is the time in the podcast where we give our wipe score for Ravenous. 0 wipes is a perfect movie. It is a Guy Pearce and Robert Carlyle making out in a bear trap. And 5 wipes is an absolute disaster. It is Major Knox stew. Ash, we'll start with you. What is your wipe score for Ravenous?
So when you hear the words Western horror cannibal film, it sounds absolutely genius. And it's either going to be one of the fucking best things you have ever seen, or the worst. And I have to say that I was a little disappointed to know that this movie is a little bit closer to the latter. I think that while, yes, obviously I recognize that they're trying to do some comedic things here, the tone is just not clear. And because of that, this movie isn't charming in the way that Black comedies often are. I think it fails wholly on its face to present itself as a smart Black comedy horror film. And I think, yes, it's bonkers, like those great Black comedy horror films of the past or, of more recent years, but not in an intentional way. It's just too haphazard. And I think Guy Pearce is totally wasted in this movie. I love Guy Pearce and he's nothing in this film. Robert Carlyle does his absolute best to try to save it, but I just think the script, the premise, it's a little too weak. Is it the worst thing I've ever seen? Of course not. But I think it's a 3-wipe movie. I think it's on the same caliber of In the Army Now last week. I enjoyed it about as much. It is what it is. And I hope that someone out there is listening and takes the idea of a Western horror cannibal film and gives us the one that we truly deserve.
Yeah, I think Trey Parker and Matt Stone already did it. Listen, when Ben commissioned this movie, I thought that we were going to get a straight Western cannibal movie. And it was going to be all of the cliches that we always get. There's going to be a band of guys that are out there. They find out they got a taste for blood. And then, one by one, it's going to be like The Thing, but in a cave in the Old West. I was so glad when this movie opened up and I was laughing from the beginning because I was like, I did not expect this to be a comedy. But it is. It's funny. It's fun. And it blends together elements of so many other movies I adore, as we mentioned, Interview with the Vampire, Lost Boys. It has a great cast. It has a surprisingly great set. It's beautiful. And the sound, I'm not talking about like the soundtrack, but the actual Foley work is pretty fucking good. Yes, the story could be better and it needs a completely new soundtrack, but it definitely falls in the category of watch this with everyone who's never seen it. Like if somebody hasn't seen Ravenous, I want to sit down and watch it with them and just see their reaction and kind of laugh along with them. If they are my friend, they will probably laugh. But I did have it pegged at 1.5. And after discussing with you, Ash, this is very rare for me. It did slide a little bit in my estimation. I still think that it is creative and it got a lot of laughs out of me, but it's not quite 1.5 wipes. This is 2 wipes. So 2 wipes from me, 3 wipes from you, Ash. That's simple math of 2.5 wipe average for Ravenous.
And with a score at 2.5 wipes, that puts Ravenous, it ties it in the 144th spot with Empire Records, Back to the Beach, and Little Giants.
Now I feel bad about knocking down the two.
I don't. I mean, I think Empire Records is a really fun movie. I think Little Giants was fine. Back to the Beach was fine. This is a fine movie. You know, it's not the best in its category, but it's fine.
Ben, if there's any doubt in your mind, I can guarantee you that if Big D were here, this would be a much lower wipe score. So we got away with one here. We really did, buddy. I'm with you. All right, Ash, looks like we got a couple minutes to dig into our mailbag. What do you got?
So the first email we've got here comes from Rachel C., and she's talking about Father of the Bride. And this one, Gene, is addressed to you and I. And I just want to read the subject line. I want to give Ash and Gene a big hug, you broken, jaded, dead inside souls. And Rachel says, look, I poured a drink and laughed my ass off as you guys shat all over my beloved tequila sunrise like my dog after a bean burrito 2-pack. I admit your critiques were largely valid, though that movie is still awesome. But Father of the Bride? Ash, it's not about Annie being their property or losing her virginity. As Big D wisely surmised, it's about life-changing, letting go of the past, and allowing the family unit you treasured for 20 plus years to evolve. My only child turns 11 in a couple weeks. The next decade is going to go by in the blink of an eye. I guarantee if she blindsides me with news in 10 years that she's getting married to some guy she just met, it'll take me a breath to warm up to the idea. I know how many mistakes I made at that age and what many guys are like. I sound exactly like George. Yeah. I admit I'm overprotective, though George watching America's Most Wanted every night is the 90s version of deep dive Googling someone. Who wouldn't do that before a man marries your only daughter? On a more serious note, yes, be overprotective of your daughters and teach them how to be protective of themselves. The predators are out there, lots of them. I had an unfortunate personal experience with one and I was never the same person again. So fuck yes, be overprotective of your daughters. Actually, on that topic, if you want to take a break from 80s, 90s movies, I highly recommend Promising Young Woman, a modern masterpiece. It's very funny, creative, and smart, but also triggering and depressing. Sometimes I don't want movies to remind me of the ugly parts of life. Sometimes I just want to watch Father of the Bride with its upstanding, sweet characters and no real problems. And there are worse role models for my daughter, who, by the way, has talked about becoming an architect like Annie since she was 7. On the weekends, most kids want to go to the park or play video games. My daughter asked me to take her to open houses, preferably older homes. We walk through, she takes notice of the design details, and that's pretty cool. Ash and Jean, I'm sorry the movie wasn't the comfort food for you that is for me. Hated it still seems harsh, but I can never stay mad at you. Though, Jean, you might want to dial back on the grumpiness just a degree. Between this and Drop Dead Gorgeous, you've gone from the hilarious, kind, and adventurous one to the get off my lawn curmudgeon. Anyway, still worth every penny, and I enjoyed the episode from beginning to end. So thank you. You're all so good at what you do. Your unique insights, humor, and most of all, genuine rapport have become its own dose of weekly comfort food for me. It doesn't even matter what the movie is. You each hold a little place in my heart. If I had a mailing address, I'd add you to my Christmas card list, but here's a virtual card. Happy holidays and all of my best to you and your families.
Well, Rachel, I hope the Christmas party I just threw for Ravenous gives you some faith that I can still have fun with a movie. All it needs is cannibals, Robert Carlyle, who I thought was Hugh Jackman, and a really good soundtrack, and I'm in.
Well, and I just want to say one thing, Rachel. Love you. Thank you so much for your kind words and for calling us cold, dead-hearted people at the same time. But I just want to say, here's the deal. I'll prove my point with one thing. If this movie were about a dude that met a girl in Europe and came back and told his parents he was getting married, that would be the end of the film. So
directed by Peter Jackson.
Right, exactly. Unless, of course, it all of a sudden was set in the West and became a cannibal film, which might be the movie we all need.
Parents, also consider this when you're worried about your kid who's 22 years old wanting to get married. They could end up like me. Yeah. 41 years old, unmarried, no children. Ash, I thought about this the other day. I moved back to Arizona in 2013. I lived at McClintock and Broadway. It is now 2021. I now live less than 2 miles away from that apartment, working at the same place. And I'm like, what the fuck happened to 8 years? What did I do? Other people I know have had like their fucking children in school now. My niece is graduating from architecture school, actually. And I'm like, fuck, what the fuck? I got a Miata. That's all that happened.
So I moved to Houston same year as you, 2013. wasn't married, didn't have children. And since then, I have gotten married, got a doctorate degree, had 2 children, and bought 2 houses. So I don't know. But I'm really jealous of your life a lot of the time. So maybe you win.
I mean, yeah, when June got diarrhea today, it was magical. It's awesome. And now Sarah's building me a shack out back, so she has to deal with me.
Oh my God.
Go to your shack. Well, thank you, Rachel, for your commission and for your letter. I hope that my response to Titanic, In the Army Now, and now Ravenous lets you know that I'm still a fun guy. I'm still Eugene.
Yeah.
Just old.
Just cold-hearted, like we all love. All right, so up next, we've got a letter from an Ash, but this Ash is from the UK. And they say, "Hiya, my name is Ash and I live in the UK. I've been listening to your podcast for just over a year now and thought that I needed to email you just to say thanks. For years, I've been craving a movie review podcast that focuses on 80s and 90s movies, as I love that period. Being 42 myself, I have seen pretty much all the movies you guys have reviewed and loved every single review. My job requires a 2-hour round trip drive every day, and you guys keep me entertained throughout. So just thought I should let you know that you guys are loved across the pond and keep up the good work. Big D, Ash, and Jean, have a great Christmas and Happy New Year. Yours, Ash."
Now, I've been to the UK. I studied there for an entire summer. I've also read Notes from a Small Island. So I should have an idea of the geography of the United Kingdom. And yet, to me, if you said that you did a 2-hour round trip commute, I would just assume that you're driving in circles around the entire island.
Maybe she commutes to Paris through the Channel. I mean, that's a pretty long one.
It might, you know what it might be is if you're dealing with like London traffic or like Manchester traffic, it's just sitting in traffic the whole time. I was thinking like open roads and shit.
The beautiful open roads of the UK as opposed to the 19 interstates that we have here in Houston. Just like spaghetti tapped on top of each other.
Well, Ash, I'm glad that we could help out with your commute and share some of our ignorance of your geography. Thanks so much for writing in, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you too.
Well, and continuing our international email chain here, we've got one from Hungary. Bodzo from Hungary writes in and says, "Hey, Chat Crew, you're great. I love you all. Old and new hosts alike. I don't know why I haven't sent you an email before. I've been following since the first season of Westworld. Thank you for the hours and hours of funny and thought-provoking entertainment. Your content is so much more than just a podcast. You are carefree, clever, and honest. You are truly great. Keep up the good work and keep it coming. Have a nice day." Bodzo from Hungary.
It's crazy to me to think Westworld season 1 was, what was that, 4 years ago, 3 years ago?
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
Like
yeah.
the fact that we've been doing this long and that anybody's been listening for that long and not gotten sick of us. I think about podcasts that I listen to, and I go through phases, man. I used to love Tuesdays with Stories. It was like a Mark Norman podcast. And eventually I just got sick of them. And maybe it's how people feel about me. Because I was like, man, this guy's just like, all he does is talk about his fucking sex life. And he's just becoming more and more pig-headed. And it's always the same shit every time. They got like their own shticks. They become characters of themselves. And I let it go. And there's a few that, have that staying power, I think. Radiolab or The Daily, which I think everybody loves The Daily. It was interesting to know that anybody's been listening that long, especially for Hungary. So thank you, Bodzo, for writing in.
Yeah, I mean, I think about just like my own journey with this podcast. In 2 weeks, I'll have been on the show 2 years actively with you guys, which is just like insane to me. And then if you think about how long I've been listening, when I started listening, I only had 1 kid and I was still working a completely different job. And my life is totally different now. So I think we have a benefit of changing it up with movies every week. And, our TV listeners get to hear much different shows. I cannot wait, by the way, to start doing TV again. I think it's going to be amazing. I swore I would never want to do it again and was like, fuck shit on TV. Like, I hate it. And now I'm like, oh, I really want to do another show because I'm watching Wheel of Time and I'm watching all of these things where I'm like, I just want to talk to Gene and maybe King B if he's not angry that day about all of the awesome things that are happening in these shows.
I'm so glad to hear that because we really need you on the TV pods. And I think especially to hear that Big D is excited about doing House of the Dragon.
Yes.
And doing Westworld season 4. And I know he said, I'm hoping he forgets because he also wants to do Last of Us. I would love to just do Last of Us, like just watch it and then talk to each other about it. Not necessarily even do a podcast, although he's hell bent on it.
We could bring back Shappy Hour for that.
So I was going to say, actually, so as the studio / seance room gets built out here, I'm like so excited to have just a dedicated streaming space where I could just walk a couple feet, flick the camera on, and just go again. Because right now it's a 30-minute commute to get to record, and I'm so busy with the construction process that I haven't been able to like devote any time to streaming other than like a few live edits here and there. So guys, stick around on Twitch. We will be back. Maybe not Shappy Hour every Friday, but some TV content and just some hangouts in general.
I think we should commit to like a New Year's like video game fest, like just a one-off, because I have not played video games since I moved into this house, and I think it's time.
Like on New Year's Day?
I mean, it doesn't have to be New Year's Day, but like somewhere near it, right? Like welcome to 2022. Let's kill some shit together.
I can dig it. Yeah, I can dig it.
Shout on the new year.
Yeah, stay tuned for more on that. There's actually a lot of good shit to be playing right now too. It's free on Xbox Game Pass.
Let's do it.
We like free. All right. Well, thank you, Rachel, Ashley, and Bodzo for writing in. Ash, thank you for sharing those emails with us. If you'd like to write in, you can write us at host@shatthemovies.com or call us and leave a voicemail at 914-719-SHAT. And for next week's movie, when the evil Skeletor finds a mysterious power called the Cosmic Key, he becomes nearly invincible. However, courageous warrior He-Man locates inventor Gwildor, who created the key and has another version of it. During a battle, one of the keys is transported to Earth, where it is found by teenagers Julie and Kevin. Now both He-Man and Skeletor's forces arrive on Earth, searching for the potent weapon. This was commissioned by William C. and was released August 7th, 1987. And Ash, I think this is that solid script and rich, robust storyline that you're looking for.
I mean, as soon as you said Skeletor, I was like, this is going to be a highbrow film.
All right, Ben, thank you so much for your commission. And thank you, William, for commissioning our upcoming movie. That concludes this week's episode of Shat The Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat The Movies. You can email us, host@shatthemovies.com. Support the podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link, buying our merch, or by commissioning your own movie. Find all that information by visiting our website, shatthemovies.com. Also, check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Lovecraft Country, Westworld, True Detective, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, and Watchmen. Find all the information on our website, shatontv.com. Wherever fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by iTunes, please leave a 5-star review. That helps the podcast grow. Also, if you are a Spotify user, you can leave us a review there. We'd really, really appreciate it. That's a new feature and can really help us get some visibility on Spotify. On behalf of my co-hosts, Ash and Big D, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us next week for the following movie.
At the far end of the universe, there is a planet ruled by a being of utter evil. And there is only one man who dares challenge him. They are locked in a battle to the death. A battle that will take them across the heavens.
Stop him!
A battle that will finally be fought.
I want them hunted down and brought to me!
Across the face.
Police! Nobody move!
Of Earth.
I think I'm gonna need some backup.
Can you show us the way?
Of course. No.
From a distant galaxy, they have come to Earth. Dolph Lundgren as He-Man, Frank Langella as Skeletor. Only they have the powers to be masters of the universe. Live the adventure.